to use NLP techniques to captivate your audience. A little bit of housekeeping. If you could please keep your videos on, please keep yourself on mute. And if you would like to ask a question, if you would put it in the chat, you can put a question in the chat while Beverley's talking, just in case you forget the question. So please do just put it in the chat, and once Beverley's finished, I will then ask the questions in the chat. And if you would like to ask any other question yourself, then please just put in the chat you'd like to ask a question, and you can unmute yourself and ask whatever you'd like to ask Beverley. So thank you very much, Beverley, for doing this for us. I'm really looking forward to learning all about NLP. So please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello and welcome to everyone. I just want everyone to know this course has been specifically designed with all of you in mind. It's unique. You can't see it anywhere else in the world. I've not seen one of these because I created it just for you. Anyway, so we'll start with just a little bit of introduction to NLP. I'm doing this because, you know, I'm not sure what exposure people have had to NLP, so I'll just do the very basics. So NLP was founded by Richard Bandler and John Grinder, who were both psychotherapists in the 70s. And what they did was they looked at people's behavior and looked at different human beings and said, some people get it right and others don't. Some people have good behavior patterns, others don't. What's the difference? How do we make those who don't have good behavior patterns, who don't have good behavior patterns or bad behavior patterns or negative ones, and turn them into positive ones? And they then decided, or they looked at the good behavior patterns and decided that they were models. They were models of behavior, and looked at ways in which transforming people's thinking from the bad behavior patterns or negative behavior patterns they had into good behavior patterns. So one of the things about NLP is that it is considered to be a model of modeling behavior. So in NLP, you get models of behavior or models of strategies and techniques that you can use to develop and transform people and their behaviors and bad habits into good behavior patterns. So that is what NLP is supposed to do. Now, NLP is called NLP, funnily enough, because Richard Bandler was caught speeding on the motorway and he was pulled over by a cop. And he didn't know what to say when they asked him, what's your profession? And he said, I'm a neuro-linguistic programmer. And that's how NLP, the phrase came about. And it's quite a funny story. I thought I'd let you know that. Whether that's true or not, but that's what I read. Anyway, so let's go to the letters NLP. What do they mean? N stands for neuro, meaning anything relating to the nervous system. The information we take in affects how we function neurologically. Linguistic is about language, how we become more of language to take in information, which helps us to make better decisions and communicate consciously or unconsciously. And the P is for programming, how we create patterns and habits and behaviors that follow a particular path based on the information we received. In a nutshell, NLP is about using language to program our nervous system into more useful habits. We know this is possible because we can train ourselves. We can train ourselves to eat better. We can train ourselves to sleep better. We can train ourselves to do physical exercise. We are adapting our behavior with we're replacing poor habits with better habits. So that's what NLP does. But one of the things it does do, it does it very quickly. Some of the techniques are designed to do it quickly. and why shouldn't you do it quickly if there's a way in which to do it quickly? And that's one of the key distinctions between NLP and other therapies. So why did I want to do this? Because what I've done in the past and the things I know about NLP and what I've come to learn about storytelling is that there is a strong link between the two. So what is this link? In NLP, it's often shown using the iceberg analogy. So 10% is what we see and we know and is visible. 90% of our mental activity is unknown and often referred to as the unconscious. So what happens with what we know? We see words, we speak words, we hear tones, we gesticulate, there's body language we can see, there's behavior we can observe, and we can experience the world through our senses. So that's what we know. And what the mind does with that is we experience all of these things and we store it. We've got a way in the brain to stores information and its experiences, and it edits, it distorts, it discards, and somewhere in our unconscious mind, we build up patterns, we build up thinking, we build up knowledge, we build up experience. And based on what happens on the outside, filters through the mind and the senses into the unconscious to form these things, our values, our beliefs, our imagination, things that spark and trigger our imagination, our intuition. We know it's there, but we can't feel or touch it. And sometimes we experience it. Some people are closer to intuition than others. Women are often referred to as having a better intuition than men. Not that I want to open that conversation. So creativity lives in the unconscious, our emotions and feelings, our dreams, and long-term memory. So that's what happens. And what NLP tries to do, it tries to make that which is unconscious conscious in a way that is practiced, learned, and deliberate. Okay, so what do we do in storytelling? The hero's journey is a story format, as a way of telling a story in a particular way that some of us use very regularly. I believe Natalie Haynes is coming on in a few weeks' time. She uses this format quite cleverly in her work on the Iliad and Odyssey. And it is the adventure, but it also deals with the known and the unknown and linking the two. And we've seen this in NLP, that which is conscious, or making that which is unconscious conscious and linking the two. So how do we do this? In both formats, we use language and communication. Okay, so language and communication is the bit that links it all together for us, our consciousness and our unconsciousness, that which is seen and that which is unseen or known or unknown. Very powerful. So what I want to look at next is how we communicate. What happens when we communicate? And what the theories are on communication. So when we communicate, we're looking at both things, both consciously and unconsciously, that which we can experience with our senses and that which we can, we know is happening, but we can't, it's somehow making sense. So our strongest format of receiving information is looking at body language, the physiology, what's happening when someone speaks. We don't notice it immediately, but it is happening, and the mind is taking this in, the senses is taking this in, how the person stands, how the person smiles, what they're doing with their hands, their facial expression. You're trying to read, is this truthful, is it honest, is it deceitful? Your mind is trying to make sense of it so that you can store it accurately. Breathing is a huge thing about physiology because that sets the pace of the conversation, sets the pace of the communication. And also the way someone breathes deeply, slowly, shallowly will tell you how sincere and authentic it is. So on the next level of what we experience is tonality. 38% of how we communicate and we learn about communication and what we're hearing is in the tone. We've often heard of people saying, it's not what you say, but how you say it. And that is what makes a bigger impact. I often, when I'm angry, I'm really angry, you know, I speak very softly. Then everybody knows Beverley's really angry. But if I'm just making a noise and I genuinely am just having a laugh and play acting at being angry. But when I'm silent, you know, I'm very angry and it speaks very loudly. And the people around me respond to that. And then we get to words. We think words is communication. But we only learn from words at 7%. The mind and the body is taking in 7% of what is said through words. The communication is 7%. And we've got words, keywords, trigger words. We've got motifs, symbols, and images. Those are types of words. And as storytellers, we've only got words to really rely on. And as a result, it is a huge task to get our communication across. And hats off to everybody who writes using words and is successful. So in today's world, one of the things we're struggling with, why this is so important, if we think about Zoom and how everything is on Zoom at the moment, even our little chat at the moment, people are struggling to get the full experience of the communication because of these figures. This is a generalization, yes. There's a lot of research that goes into this, but this is what they've come up with. So when you're writing words on a page, look how much is lost. 93% is lost to the communication. So you've really got to ramp up your game with the use of words, how you set it out on the page, how you bring out tonality, how you explain your gestures, etc. This is hugely, hugely important. And I thought, and in NLP, we need to know this because when we're looking and communicating with anybody, we are looking for the signs of the communication to make rapid sense of what the message actually is. Because 9 times out of 10, what the body's saying, what the face is saying, is more important than what the words are saying. Okay? So, what makes a powerful story? So we've got our words, we know how to structure it, we know we need characters, we need a plot, we need a theme, we need a setting, we need structure, we need style and tone. But what makes it powerful? Okay, what are the stories that stand out? And what the research is saying currently is that we must, as an audience, we must relate to the story. Okay, it must be relatable. We can see ourselves in it. We can relate to the character because if in a particular situation, we can see ourselves doing exactly the same thing that the character's doing or experiencing. We must be able to immerse ourselves in it, get lost. I can spend days when on holiday, I take 3 or 4 fat books, and within 2 or 3 or 4 fat books, I would have read in 2 weeks. And I'm almost never seen. I'm just on the beach reading in the sun the days we could go traveling. It's because I'm totally immersed, and hours can go by. It must evoke strong emotions and feelings. If it didn't do this, we might as well be reading the alphabet. Okay, but a good, powerful story will bring your emotions along, pull you from side to side, make you sad, angry, all perhaps in a paragraph on a page. So it must have strong emotions and evoke strong feelings. It must be simple. The story and the themes you must be able to grasp it very quickly, understand it, and be able to repeat it and tell the story again in very simple language, because that makes it memorable. It must be familiar. You know, it's not too far out of your comfort zone. There's things that you can still touch onto and say, I can do this. I can feel this. I can think about this. It is within my realm of experience, but it does take me slightly out. I can think, yes, I could imagine I could do that. Oh no, I don't think that's for me. I wouldn't do that. If your character's doing something unfamiliar. It must create drama, a sense of crisis, conflict, a challenge. And you must be able to draw your own conclusions. That's apparently what makes a powerful story. And one of the stories we know that's a hugely powerful story and stands the test of time is the story of Romeo and Juliet. Everybody knows that story, and it gets told in various formats, in soap operas, novellas, Jane Austen. There's, you know, it's the same similar kind of stories, and we all know about Romeo and Juliet, and we can draw our own conclusions. You know, the characters are powerful. We can think about what if it wasn't like that? I've seen other movies where they've changed the ending, because what if they didn't miss each other? What if she didn't die? Etc., etc., etc. And people do ask those questions. It makes them think, it expands their experience, and more importantly, it transforms us. So NLP and storytelling is about transforming, okay, through learning and experience. That's what we're all trying to achieve. In the case of NLP, we want to transform bad habits into good habits. And in terms of telling the story, we want people's experience to be expanded and transformed, as well as their understanding of just human life. So, coming back to our symbol of that we use quite regularly in NLP, is our iceberg example. So we both in the business of storytelling, and NLP are both in the business of making that which is unconscious conscious, and using our senses and the full experience we have of life, which we will automatically store in a way that is how we process things, and everybody's unique about how they process and how they reference things. But it is about that piece of transformation and making the two meet. So as storytellers, you want to trigger and elicit that which is unconscious and make it conscious, and deliberately so, but without telling, because we want people to make up their own minds, even if they're contentious or have different points of view. So one of the useful techniques we have, there are loads of techniques, and I've just chosen 4 here that can possibly help us to make our words on the page more powerful, make our stories more powerful, and increase the experience of our audience, and help to transform them. Because what are the most memorable stories are the ones that's transformed you, keeps you thinking, keeps you asking the questions. So one of the things we have learned is something called the VAK modalities, what this is we all have a predisposition as to how we learn. So transforming is about learning and taking learning from an experience. And the story will give us that experience. It takes us on a little journey, and hopefully we learn and transform our thinking, our outlook, etc. So why do we want to know how people in general learn? Because our audience is anybody in society can pick up a book or read our play or listen to our podcast or whatever. So what we've learned in the research is that 60% of the world population are visual learners. They learn by seeing and reading, seeing gestures and gesticulating. People who are visual learners, they learn very quickly. And for them, a key phrase is seeing is believing. Okay, so that's how they learn. And 20% of the population are auditory learners. They learn through listening and speaking. They also learn through rhyme and patterns. So they'll say things over and over and repeat it back to you to show that they've learned. So a key phrase for them is working in harmony. If you listen to that, that's harmony is oral. Auditory. And then kinesthetic is about the feelings and experiences. And 20% of the population learns through kinesthetic approach. This is touch, physical, manual. They are slower learners because they have to go through making a picture or making a sound with what they're doing. And they will often use language of things like, it's weighing on me, it feels heavy. So they have to describe things in how things feel. So why am I telling you about this? You don't know who your audience is. It can be anything and anybody out there. So what we have to do is use a blended approach and try and span all of these experiences, these ways of learning through visual, auditory, and kinesthetic means. So knowing this information means when you look at your people you are talking to in terms of communication in NLP, we would want to say, okay, what type of person is this? If they're talking quickly and they gesticulate, I'm a visual person, so I'll gesticulate, talk very quickly, and before long, I would have lost somebody I've spoken to if I don't slow down. So if I'm reading the person I'm talking to, I will recalibrate and I will pick up on their language. What sort of words are they using? Oh, that sounds okay. I like the sound of that idea. This person is an auditory person. So then I know I need to recalibrate. I need to speak slower and probably repeat something if I really want them to learn. The same with the kinesthetic, oh, could you show me what I need to do? Then I know this person's a kinesthetic. They need to experience, and then I'll adapt what I'm needing to teach them or transform, how I need to transform them using this understanding. But we don't know that of our audience, so we've got to use everything in our arsenal, and that's these three things. Make it visual, use auditory cues, and or get your characters to do something. Because people can put themselves in that experience. So I want to just share with you a poem of a Greek poet called Yannis Ritsos, and it's a very short poem, and I just want to show you how he uses the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic. And it's called Gradations of Sensation. The sun sank, pink, orange. The sea, dark azure green. Far out, a boat, a black rocking mark. Someone stood up and shouted, "A boat, a boat!" The others at the coffee house left their chairs. They looked. There was a boat for sure. But the one who had shouted, as if guilty now, under the stern looks of the others, looked down and said in a low voice, I lied to you. So you can see how he creates that picture using visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. I thought that was very powerful. One of my favorite poets. Okay, right. So the next technique is called improved states. And by this, I mean, this is one of the core principles of NLP is the state you're in is the state your audience is in. And why am I telling you this? Is when we're writing, not only because of what we remember, but also what we want to construct, we need to experience those universal feelings that can put our audience in the place of either the event, the setting, or the characters you are talking about, or the conflict, etc. And how do we do this? Okay, we do this using visual cues, auditory cues, kinesthetic cues, what I've just spoken about, and then there are further two, olfactory and gustatory. Olfactory is the smell or the taste. And what we have to do is to amplify these things on a page, in a paragraph in the story. Okay, I used to be a flamenco dancer. I still do some ever so now and again. One of the things I used to know, I used to really captivate my audience, was because I was doing all of these things, not the olfactory and the gustatory, but certainly the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic, the tapping of my heels, the sound of the music, the movements of my arms and the sounds of my castanets. And one of the things that I always knew I captivated my audience was there was a definite hush when I was performing. It was palpable, that silence of how everybody was strapped at my feet or my hands. And the nice thing about flamenco really is that you don't have to look at the audience. You can really be very internal and look down. And that's one of the nice parts of that dance form, is that you can really go inward. So why am I telling storytellers this? Is that the audience that you are writing to needs to know and feel and experience the state that you're in. So if you really want to take them to a point, take yourself to that point first and examine everything there is to examine about the visual side of it, the auditory side of it, the kinesthetic side of it. What are they smelling? What are they tasting? And really look at the words that can amplify this for you on a page. So that's a really great technique. I love that. That's one. And then the third one I want to talk about is building rapport. What this means is people when people like each other, when people are like each other, they like each other. In other words, like equals like. Okay, so you've often walked into a room and someone said their name was Beverley or Anna or Rachel, and you suddenly thought, oh, I don't like that person, and you don't know why that is, but there'll be somewhere in your memory bank, your memory bank will remind you that there was a Rachel who used to nick your sweets off you in the playground at lunchtime every day at school. And so every Rachel you experience thereafter is not so great. And it's a funny little thing that. So we need to do like for like when we're writing the stories. And the easiest way to build rapport, now with rapport, we use rapport in sales, we use it with gestures, we use it, and we match non-verbal cues. You know, remember the 55% physiology. So that's the easiest one to do, is to match stance, facial expression, etc. But we don't have that opportunity on a page. The easiest way to do this is to use voice, breathing pace, and following the eyes. So your character has to do all these things for you. The sound of the voice, the pace of their breathing, fast, shallow, rapid, following their eyes, scanning the room, looking to the furthest corner of the room, locking eyes with someone. A lot of people write to avatars. They'll pen characters on their computer or on their wall, and they write to those characters as though they were speaking to them, etc. Another example is a cliffhanger. That's a pause. A cliffhanger, so much happened, and it's a pause. You are hungry for more, isn't it? So your audience and your characters need to come together because they are like each other, and you've got to tap into or trigger somewhere in your audience the things that they would like. Now, it's very broad because you don't know, but you're taking a stab and you're trying to make them as believable as possible. I mean, sometimes when I'm on the phone and someone phones me in a panic, I will just change my breathing. They're breathing fast, their pitch is high, and I will just bring them down very slowly by asking one question, breathing slowly. Try it with someone you don't know, and you can just breathe slower and it'll change their pace. But people like people who are like themselves. So try and emulate that in your writing with your characters and their experiences. The fourth NLP technique is sensory accessing cues. So who remembers the Madeleine McCann incident where she was abducted? It's still on in the press at the moment. Rachel remembers. And one of the reasons why they do that, often when there's a case of a missing person or...
Beverley, can you just if people don't know what the Madeleine McCann, can you just explain very quickly what it was?
Okay, sure. Madeleine McCann was abducted whilst her parents, who were both doctors, were on holiday in Spain. And
Portugal.
Was it Portugal? Sorry, that's right.
She was abducted in Portugal, and she was about 3, and she was abducted from her hotel room.
Yes, and there was speculation that her parents may have been involved. They had no clue what might have happened to her, and there was a big there was a lot of press on this particular event, and still last year or earlier this year there was still stuff in the news, and the parents proclaimed their innocence, and so on. But what I'm told by my neighbor, who's a police officer, they always do this. They encourage, when there's a missing person, whether it's a child or an adult, they always look internal first, to the families, to the spouses, etc. And what they do is they put you on telly so that they can see what your micro movements in your face is, because they can tell whether or not you are lying. And we've seen this on television programs with police officers, police shows. They want to see how if the person's lying or telling the truth. So that's what they do 9 times out of 10. They put you on the telly so that there's a recording that they can play back and look at the micro movements, what your eyes are doing. So this is the biggest windows to the soul, or what the mind is doing. But there's all sorts of other micro movements that happen on your nose and your face. Your skin flushes, you go red, or you look pale. You've seen that someone's face just drains when they're full of fear, and all the blood drains from their face and they're absolutely pale. And those are all signals as to what's going on inside. So why am I telling you this? So if you look at this picture of the young lady's face, and what she's doing on the left is imagined or constructed. it's nothing she's experienced before. If you look at the cues on the right, it's what's happened to her before. Okay, so if I ask you, have you ever told a lie? Which way is your eyes going? Think about that. Have you ever told a lie? And 9 times out of 10, it would go to the right, because most of the time, some of us would have told a little white lie, big or small. Okay, we remembered the time we told a lie and we heard what we said. So our eyes will go to the right towards our ear, and that's remembering what lie we said. Okay, when it's a visual image we're remembering, our eyes will go to the top right. For kinesthetic, if we're checking out what we're feeling, our eyes will go to the bottom to the right. And anything that is manufactured or created is to the left. Visually in the upper corner, auditory towards your ear, kinesthetic, having internal dialogue. How could this play out? If I said that, would this work? Would that work? Do you see what I mean? So you're testing out how things might feel. So your characters could use these movements, or when you're writing, you could be using this. Am I writing about something that happened to me? And then I'm going to be thinking about the picture, the sound, the feelings. I'm going to go, my eyes are deliberately going to go to the right. Let me remember what happened. What did I see? What did I hear, etc. Or if I'm writing about something imaginary, like a fairyland that I've never seen, never been part of, etc., I will deliberately move everything to the left. And you can absolutely do that to access what it is you want to access. So, you know, this has been used in stories several times. We know Sherlock Holmes, he's famous for reading cues. What people say, how they say it, what their face is doing, what their faces are not doing. So there's an example of where in stories this has been used. The fifth technique is viewpoint, standing in your character's shoes and looking at it from all angles. This is a technique we use in NLP, particularly when we're practicing things we don't know about. So let's say this particular talk, I've not done it before, and I'm posing arguments or looking at conflict or how you're going to hear it. I'm going to stand one way and then I'm going to turn 180 degrees if I'm in a conflict and I want to understand what my opponent's thinking. I'll turn 180 degrees and say, okay, now I'm in his shoes. What am I thinking? What does it look like from his or her perspective of what I've just said? And then when I'm looking at the side, I'm looking at both characters, myself, my opponent, and does it sound plausible? Does it sound real? Can I test it? Can I hear it? Can I see it? Can I feel it? So this is making things authentic and plausible and able to follow through. And this is how you create the drama and crisis in your stories, by looking at all of these points of view. And in summary, so that's what I thought would be the most useful NLP techniques in a short space of time that I could share with you. So we've learned about NLP, how it started and how it links to storytelling, and how they both access the sweet spot, and how they both want to transform through stories, experiences, and learning. And we've understood how our audience learns through physiology, sounds, and words, and how our job is so difficult as authors and writers, and some of the useful techniques that can help us to amplify, enrich the experience for our readers and our audience. So that's me, if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Beverley. I have a few. If anybody has any questions, please can you put them in the chat? And if you would like to put them in Portuñol, Portuguese or Spanish, I can endeavour to translate. Portuñol and Spanish would be easier for me, but I can try if you want to write in Portuguese. I'll just ask Betty to help me. So first thing, can you go back to the slide about the stuff to do with like the eyes and looking to the left and the right? Because you kind of started off explaining about the issues with Madeleine McCann, and you didn't say what the problem with there was a lot of suspicion on the family. And can you explain a bit why? What did they not do right, in inverted commas? Why are people suspicious of them?
Well, they went to dinner and left their child sleeping in a room, isn't it? And there were just quite a few threads. There were some journeys that were unexplained soon after the child disappeared. There were just things that didn't tie up. And they thought maybe there was a problem with dosage of medication. They thought the parents had gone out to dinner, and maybe they gave the children sleeping medication to keep them safe, but maybe there was an overdose. So there was quite a lot of suspicion around the mother and the father. However, the mother and father, they told the same story. The friends told the same story. And it just also looked and sounded a little bit too good to be true. So everybody told the same story.
Mm-hmm. So there was a point then when everybody tells the same story, it's suspicious. And also, was there not something about the way that the mother was on the camera, that she was one of those people, I think, where her eyes did go the wrong way, and she wasn't lying though.
No. Well, I mean, the jury's still out where that's concerned, isn't it? I don't think the matter's ever been resolved, because the little girl has not been found, although there's some stories now where they're arresting some German tourist at the time, but that's still not confirmed. No, it's just speculation. And also there is no body found, and they still don't know if she's dead or alive. No, so she could very well have been abducted for some other reasons and being kept elsewhere. So we don't know, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all a very sad story. Very sad. So back to something happier. Ian has asked a question. Ian McDonald. Hello, Ian. Is saying improved states for audience. Can you say more about that in fiction when you were looking back about improved states for audience? I was thinking, I've got that underlined as well, especially when you were talking about kind of the flamenco dancing and how you weren't even looking at the audience, but you knew that almost without looking at, but you didn't have to look at them to know that they were with you, and you could feel that. So how can you do something like that in fiction?
Well, so what I'm saying here is, in fiction, obviously, so you're going to look to the left of your brain, isn't it? And the thing is, you're not going to take your audience so far from what they know. You're going to have some reference points that are familiar. I mean, when my husband, he likes science fiction. And every time he chooses a movie, it'll be some science fiction thing. And I always say, oh, it's just soap operas in space. It's just in another setting, And to me, so it's familiar. The storylines are familiar, but the setting isn't familiar, right? Or they try to make it not so familiar. We know what inside spaceships look like. So, because spaceships do go to the moon, they go into space, and we know what they kind of look and feel like. Apollo 13 is an example, very detailed of what that looks like, but that actually documents an experience. So when someone takes, let's say, the inside of a spaceship or some form of space travel vehicle, it has the reference points that we may have looked at when we've watched Apollo 13. It has consoles, it's got television screens, etc. So it's not too far from my current reality, but I can still be transported. So when we're doing fiction, and we look to the left of our brain in terms of what we saw, what we heard, etc., we all know about the deathly silence in space, and and that can be you can hear silence, can't you? Just because it's it's like E.F. Schumacher says, music is made by the notes in between, the space between the notes, and that's the same of how you hear silence, is because
so there's an element with fiction where what you're trying to do is to create that in me as a reader, and to connect with me. You don't have to spell it all out to me, because what you're trying to do is make me feel that. I remembered years and years ago, oh, this was a long time ago, when I was young and had a waist, very long time ago. I came home from university one year and I had Toni Morrison's Beloved with me, and my dad picked it up and started reading it, and he used to come into the kitchen shaking because the book had upset him so much. And what he said was that he now knew what it was like to be a slave, and he knew slavery was bad. He always had known slavery was bad, but what Toni Morrison did was make him understand and feel what it was like to be like that. And I think in the end, fiction works at its best not when you tell me that something is bad or tell me that your character is angry. It's when you make me feel the character's anger, which is not the same as telling me that he's angry. It's using my feelings. You're stirring up these feelings in me, which is the same with the cliffhangers.
Yes.
And it's interesting to see how natural NLP is. Like, it's almost like they've modelled something that actually existed rather than inventing something new.
Yes, they're just reframing what is there already. They're just telling it, they call NLP the model of modeling. And so it's all these models to model your behavior or your audience's behavior that feels real to them and yourself. But the reason I'm saying this is you need to experience that yourself. And all I'm saying here is deepen your own experience and knowledge of the thing you're trying to explain, and you will find the right words. In our talk last time with Rosemary Shapiro, with her mentor within, was about accessing that inner wisdom. In our unconscious, we have this inner wisdom, and it's to create the space, which is what this is. The state you're in is the state your audience is in, is to find that inner wisdom, and the right words will come. You know, we do there's a lot of emphasis these days on meditation and mindfulness and all of that. But it's really that, so that you have this keen and sharp understanding of all these sensors that you can take to trigger the memories and thoughts and the feelings and the knowledge of your readers, to bring them to the surface and to make that connection with the word on the page. That's really what you're trying to do with this. I hope that helps.
That sounds great. Now, so Oriana White, hello Oriana, she has two questions. First of all, she wants to know exactly, again, what is the VAKO/G? She's forgotten.
That's okay. Are you writing this down now? V is for visual. A is for auditory, as in sound. K is for kinesthetic, which is about doing and feeling. O is for olfactory, which is nasal, smelling. And G is for gustatory, taste, gustation, eating. That's what it is. And you can use all of those sensors, because it's really looking at your sensors to bring in the information. So if you harness these sensors, somewhere in the unconscious, it will trigger a memory that will come to the surface, because that's how we experience the world, through our senses.
Now, right, she gets that. She says, thank you very much. She has a question which is in Portuguese. So if I get this wrong, Betty, can you please send me a message and tell me I'm wrong? So Oriana's saying, how can I use NLP to talk about myself on my site? So that I can present myself? I'm a market researcher. So how would you use NLP to present yourself on your own website to sell yourself as a market researcher?
I think one of the things we did speak about is this rapport. Okay, so think about, you want to build rapport with your audience, and so as in marketing and sales, you want to build rapport with your audience. What do you think? Do you know anything about them? Have you done any research in terms of who actually reads your stuff? Who do you want to read your stuff? Do you have a picture of what they're about? What's their profile? I mean, we do this in sales. Who's my customer? Who am I targeting? Are they a government body? Is it just an individual sitting in a room who's got some spare time? So who am I really talking to? Hence the use of avatars. So if you understand who that is, you can then present yourself to that person. You can then also understand that using visual, auditory, and kinesthetic means to appeal to how they learn. I'm not sure what your blog is about, but if we know how they learn, using that split, most people are visual, then auditory and kinesthetic. They're slower to learn. What are you trying to do with your blog? How are you going to capture their interest? And so I would do it using rapport, actually, and align what I'm writing and selling to my audience, who are my target audience, that I want to buy my product, service, knowledge, information, etc. So that's the little bit I would use for what it is you're trying to do.
So like a market researcher, you would be looking at maybe trying to attract a certain type of business, in which case you have to speak the language of that business. That's as opposed to, because you're looking for a job in a certain area of market research.
So when I write for business and I do massive tenders, I always reflect the language of my customer. I will use the same language they've asked me the question in. And I will use terms and knowledge, and I'll pitch it to the language. Let's say I'm talking to engineers or financial people. I will use that language, that type of language, and they will see that on the page, or when I'm sitting with them, I will reflect their language. So that's one way of making them like me, because they understand I'm just like them, and then they bring me into the fold.
That is brilliant advice. So basically, for something like that, for working in market research, you then would have to really know your niche. You'd have to know, rather than just going, I will do market research for anybody, you have to think, who am I going to focus on?
That's right. So if you know who your audience is, you know how to target and pitch and use the cues, the verbal, visual, auditory cues.
I think, though, that's a problem for a lot of people, in that too much of their work life approach to getting work is scattergun, because they don't want to let something pass, so then they end up getting everything and nothing.
Yes. Yes.
I mean,
a lot of wasted effort, a lot of wasted time, not efficient. Whereas if we just sat back and looked at things from afar and planned a little better, like who we're pitching to, who our audience is, what do we actually want to achieve, we'll get better results.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Beverley. That was really, really interesting. And Oriana says that was perfect, and thanks. I'm glad that was helpful to you, Oriana. And thank you so much, Beverley. That was really interesting. Everybody, if you liked this talk, can you please say something at the bottom of the events page on the YorStory site, and this will go up, this recording will be up in a few days' time hopefully, yeah, it'll be up before the weekend, so you can also watch it again, or you can tell your friends that it was interesting and worth watching if they would like to register and watch it. And Betty's saying, Rachel, my Portuguese